Welcome to twoquestions.tv. With me today is Kyle Davies, and we're talking about stress. Welcome to twoquestions.tv. I'm Susan Baroncini-Moe. Joining me today is Kyle Davies. He's a coach, an author, and a trainer, and he teaches people how to optimize their well-being, attain clarity of mind, and perform more effectively at work, home, and in life. He's also the author of this book, The Intelligent Body, Reversing Chronic Fatigue and Pain from the Inside Out. And we're talking about that today. Hi, Kyle. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here.
My first Welsh guest. I'm so excited. I've interviewed people on many continents now and in many different countries, and not Wales. It's so exciting.
Wales, it's a very exciting place. And
yes.
It's been, because the sun has been shining, which is quite rare because normally it's raining.
So exciting. What a good day this is. Well, all right. Your book, this book is fascinating, and it's a very rich book, and it's full of so much information, and we've already agreed, now we're putting it on the air so you can't change your mind, we've already agreed you're going to come back and we're going to talk about more things in the book, but today we're going to concentrate on stress only. So in the book, you talk about that it's not just the stress that we know about, but the stress we don't feel. So could you talk about a little bit about what kinds of stress we might not be aware of and what the consequences are, what it does to our bodies?
Ooh, big question, that one.
It is.
So I think that people often think that stress, because it's a word we use every day, isn't it? Oh, I'm so stressed, this is happening, that's happening, I'm so stressed. So my sense of it is that people think that stress is that kind of agitated feeling that they have.
Right.
And I would say, well, yeah, that's maybe you can use that word for stress, but in the strictest sense, stress is a set of measurable events, subjective events that take place in body and brain. And I think there's two really important things about stress. So the first thing I think is important about stress is that there's a whole variety of things that can lead to the body being in a state of stress or triggering the stress response. So you could have a physical injury, you could be involved in a car accident, you could have a virus, you could have a bad case of flu, or you could have a buildup of emotion or an emotional trauma. And all of those things would lead to the exact same stress response in the body. So even things like a bad diet, excessive exercise, alcohol, lack of sleep, there's a whole range of things that will lead to the same stress response in the body. So I think that's really interesting, because what that means is this definition, or this split between the physical and the mental, the mind and the body, is not really there. And I think when we look at stress, we can understand that, well, stress is this thing, this response that affects probably most of the body and most of the brain. And we can see that, well, all of these different things trigger the same response. We can realize, well, actually stress is a lot more than we thought. So that's the first important thing I think about stress. The second important thing about stress is it's very possible for your body to be in the stress response or in a state of stress without you even being aware of it. So your body can be doing its thing. You could be in your conscious awareness, think you're perfectly happy. And a good example of this is that some years ago, I read a book called Healing Without Prozac and Freud by a psychiatrist called Dr. David Schreiber. And in this book, he talks about an experiment that he's doing where he's looking at kind of the stress response to a certain extent and the activity of the brain and the body when people are exposed to or watching disturbing films. So he has people in his lab, he shows them some film, and he's measuring the heart rate, blood pressure, and the activity in the brain. And he talks about, he's got this one lady in doing the experiment, she's watching this film, and he sees that her heart rate's going up and her blood pressure's kind of sky high and the activity of her brain's kind of going bonkers. And he's thinking, oh my God, this lady's in a deep state of stress. I better go and check she's all right. So he goes into the lab and he says, are you okay? Do you want me to turn this off? And she looks at him with an element of surprise. and says, "Oh no, I'm perfectly happy. I'm perfectly fine. I'm quite happy watching this." So that was the kind of evidence that her body, her brain and body are registering a response, but her conscious awareness has tuned out from it. So when I talk about the idea of invisible or hidden stress, I think it's that thing that it's very possible for us to get into that space where we do learn to tune out of that feedback. The kind of ideal is that we are kind of connected mind and body. We're aware of the feedback that we get from our body in terms of the feelings that we have, and we pay attention to those, and then we do whatever we do as a result. But it's possible, it's entirely possible for us to tune out of that. And I think one of the things is that we're a very kind of thinking-centered, brain-centered culture, and we think about everything, we overthink everything. And my sense of it, as one of the outputs of that excessive thinking and excessive spent time in one's brain or in one's head, is that we tune out. There's almost like a trap door that shuts from the neck down. Tune out of what goes on. And I think the result is that we lose touch. And there's all sorts of things that arguably that can result in that. You could experience trauma when you're young, and that can lead to you tuning out, or it could just be a habit that's developed. And as I say, because our culture is one of where we're kind of a combination of external and in our heads, we just tune out of our own feedback. So those are the two important things about stress, as I say, and that idea of not being often not being aware of when our body is registering the stress response. When that happens, obviously, I would argue over a period of time, if the body remains in the stress response, then it begins to break down, and that's when problems ensue.
Oh, I'm in trouble. I like these superhero shows. There are a lot of exciting things happening. I watch those shows a lot. I'm in trouble, Kyle. Probably my stress response is really high when I'm doing that, and I don't even know. I kind of understand what you were talking about in that study, though. When I watch shows where people are doing physically exciting things, like American Ninja Warrior or the strongman competitions, I think I can feel my body.
Well, you can feel it. That's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think.
So I was going to say that's the key thing, and I think that's one of the reasons that we like movies and we like TV, because we have that emotional response, and as humans we can become addicted to that up and down of feeling that we were getting, and there's psychological safety in that because we kind of know that we're not getting harmed. We're allowing ourselves to play a game where, because all of that emotion, it's not that it's triggered by that TV show. Our emotion emerges and is created and constructed inside of us, but we kind of set it up that we allow that to happen and we're safe. But what did you say? You kind of know that. I mean, I love watching sport as a Welshman. I love watching rugby, and I feel it, and I'm very aware of the feelings that I have, and I'm very aware of the frustration that arises if Wales are not playing well.
Don't get my husband started watching soccer. But you're saying there's more that we're not aware of.
Yeah. I think that if you are aware of it, that's great, because you can. It's at that point when you are aware, you can do something with it or about it. If you're not aware, that's when it's a problem.
Right. All right. So to someone's watching the show right now, and maybe they're going, okay, whoa, I had no idea this could be happening. And clearly stress, and whether we're aware of it or not, can have a significant impact on our body. What can that person who's just starting to become aware start to do today, now, to start to manage it, heal it, reduce it?
If you're talking about a person that is perfectly healthy,
Mm.
but recognizes that they spend an inordinate amount of time in their head shattering away, then simply being a little bit more present. It's being in the body, being aware of your breathing from time to time as you go through your day, just allowing yourself to be present, be inside, be aware of your breathing, be aware of your feet on the floor, the wind on your face. That all helps, and recognizing that you don't. I think it's recognizing that you don't have to think through everything. There is we can't. I don't think that we can necessarily control. Well, much really. I don't think we can control our thinking. I don't think we can necessarily control in this moment what we feel. What we do now influences what we think and feel into the future. But in this moment, I cannot control what I feel. But I can. So I guess there's a few things. One is, if I know that I'm not my thinking is just something that's happening, and my thoughts are not necessarily a reflection of a single reality out there, that actually what I think is affected by what I feel, because everything I see, think, and and all the rest of it is affected by my feelings. We generally think that our feelings are directly caused or affected by our thinking. I think thoughts and then I have feelings. So we've had this entire industry based on the idea that change your life, change your thoughts, you'll change your feelings, you'll change your life. And that's just not the case really, because our feelings, even though we can't separate them out in terms of locations in the brain, our feelings probably have a little bit more influence over our thinking than the other way around. But knowing that, and then knowing that, well, I'm not my thoughts, they're just kind of something that happens, that it makes it a little bit easier to not have to spend so much time in my head. So I can redirect attention, and that, the tip for that person who's watching is having that knowledge that usually kind of thinking and overthinking can make things worse. So we need a distinction a little bit between, and I think part of this is the wisdom of life, is knowing when to think and when not to think in terms of conscious thought. So it's a bit like, you use a spoon to eat soup as opposed to a fork. So a lot of the time, I think, because we're in this kind of thinking culture, we tend to not only think about a strategic problem at work, but we also think about our feelings and how we've got to solve them. And that's not what we want to think about. So if people can step into a space of believing that life can be simple and life is supposed to be simple, there are certain things to think about, but those things are not necessarily about me and my feelings. If I'm thinking about a work problem, great. But aside from that, it's more useful for me to be present in this moment, in my body, just engaged in life. Now, in doing that, it equips me to pick up on whatever it is I'm feeling. Because if I'm up in my head, then the chances are I'm not picking up on what I'm feeling. And because of this miss kind of mash of thinking and feeling, and both influencing each other, if I am just thinking about things and I'm jumping into the past and jumping into the future, there will be feelings that are created as a result of that. And because those feelings don't relate to what's going on right now, it can be difficult for me to kind of work through those or discern between anything that may be related to now and anything that's not related to now. So that I'm probably waffling a little bit there, but the kind of the key tip is it's being a little bit more present, but it's coming from an understanding that, well, actually I'm not my thinking, and then my thinking is probably not an accurate reflection of one reality, because reality, I would say, is constantly shifting. Because because whatever our reality is, really is kind of the meaning that we're inferring, or the meaning that we are putting upon whatever is going on. And because our perception is totally coloured by our feeling in the moment, then our reality in the moment is based upon that. So it's based on that state of feeling, that mood, that, so does that answer the question?
Yeah, in a really cerebral way. I think, so what I think you're saying is become more present and be aware that you don't always have to be thinking, that you can quiet the voice in your head and just be in that moment. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Super simplified?
Yeah. But part of the reason for me giving the extra bit is because it can be the case that I think the knowledge that goes with it is important. Otherwise, it can just become a technique that a person tries to force themselves into the present. Oh, I've got to be more present. I've got to be more present, and it becomes a mind-driven exercise or mind-driven technique. And for me, it's missing the essence of what it's all about. It needs to be underpinned by the idea that I am a flow of consciousness, and in order for me to be my best self, in order for me to have the best experience, I need to allow that flow of consciousness to be. So I call that my true self. When I'm aligned with my true self, it's just simply a flow, and I unfold in each moment. And there's good feelings and bad feelings and all the rest of it, but it's part of a natural flow, and that natural flow is me. And I think it's important to know that, because when I know that, I naturally am drawn into a present moment. I don't have to force myself through thinking. Again, this is a cultural thing, because we're used to doing everything through our head, and we're always used to wanting a structure and steps and techniques. Most people are doing it in that sort of way. Well, give me the steps I have to take, and they make it a mental exercise. I think that's a little bit of the difference between what I teach and what is mindfulness, because I know there are different brands of mindfulness, but an aspect of mindfulness can be observing your thoughts, and it becomes like a mental technique. And I'm a fan of the idea of, because I feel that ideally, in order to experience health, happiness, and all the rest of it, we want to be in alignment with what I'm calling our true self, which is this flow of consciousness. And that's sort of knowledge rather than a technique. I can nudge if I notice that I'm allowing myself to get caught up in thinking, I can nudge myself back into the present, but it's from that underpinning framework of, all I'm doing is I'm realigning with the flow of my true self. And it's not always easy to do that. And there may be times when I am caught off in daydreaming, and that's kind of fine too. I don't want to force myself all the time, but it's about a gentle nudge back to the present, underpinned by, well, what I'm looking to do is align with my true self.
Well, I love the idea of that, and I feel like I want to understand it more. I want to have you back to talk specifically about this concept of true self and perhaps other things in this book, because you're explaining things at such a deep level that I think we need to understand more about that. So will you come back?
I would love to come back.
I love what you're talking about. And I really want to explore more fully this idea of true self and how we can come to know it. And so come back and we'll talk about that itself, because that's worthy of its own show.
Well, it'd be my pleasure.
All right, great. So Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, here's the book. And we're going to have links down below in the show notes for today. Podcast viewers, we're also going to have the link in the show notes for you. So look on your app. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.